Greetings and welcome to the Fairfax County Police Civilian Review Panel listening session hosted by Fairfax County Supervisor Rodney Lusk from the Lead District, who is also chair of the Fairfax County Public Safety Committee. My name is Matt Reniger and I am Supervisor Lusk's Chief of Staff, and I'm just going to give you a really quick overview on how the program is going to run tonight. We're hosting this event in Crowdcast, which might be a medium that not all of you are familiar with. So we just want to give you a crash course on how it works. As we go through tonight's program, you're able to ask questions at any time. There is a prompt, a section at the bottom of your screen that says ask a question. Please ask your questions in this section and not the chat on the right-hand side of your screen so we can keep them organized and make sure we answer them in the order that they've come in. The other thing you can do is if you see a question in that prompt that you would like to be asked or was your question or that you feel strongly about, you can upvote that question and we can try to prioritize it. Also, as I mentioned earlier, try to utilize that chat on the right-hand side. That's a way for you to be interactive with the audience. So if you all want to have conversations amongst yourselves or raise specific things to be looked at later, we'll definitely be going back and reviewing that. So utilize that feature to interact with the audience. That should be enough to get us going. Besides that, just keep an eye as we move through the evening for polls or the resources that we post, but we'll let you know about those as they come up. So I'm going to turn it over here to Supervisor Lusk to get us going. So over to you, Rodney.
Delighted to have you here participating in our very first panel discussion for getting information out about our civilian review panel and then also talking about the independent auditor here in Fairfax, police independent auditor here in Fairfax County. This is an opportunity for us to hear from you on your concerns, your issues, and then also to hear your suggestions on how we might approach this very important community issue here in Fairfax. The Public Safety Committee has been engaging with a number of other advocacy groups. We've been having conversations with different homeowners associations. We've been meeting also with individual law enforcement unions and personnel to really understand what the issues are and then also what recommendations there are. We've also put together a website that we've recently launched here in Fairfax, which really aggregates all of the content on the data that's been made publicly available from our police department, also on the SROs, and then also from the information that we have on traffic stops recently released by, again, the Fairfax County Police Department. And we'd invite you to take a look at that. We'll have the link here posted for you to see in the chat. And I'll say the discussion tonight will have principally three speakers. The first will be Richard Schott, and Richard is the independent police auditor here in Fairfax County, and he's going to talk about his role in addressing issues relative to police and use of force. He'll be followed by Holly Doan, who is the chairperson of the Civilian Review Panel. She'll talk about their mission and their work, and then we'll have an opportunity for you to ask any questions relative to those two areas. And I'll say we want you to feel comfortable, and we want this to be as transparent and as open as possible, because this information will be helpful and instructive as we think through some final decisions on how we can reform our police system here in Fairfax County. So again, I appreciate all of you participating, and I'd like to now turn it over to Richard Schott. Again, he will be discussing from our independent police auditor. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Lusk. And thank everyone for taking the time out of your schedule to hear these important issues and to contribute to the conversation that is ongoing in the county. I'm going to make very brief comments because, again, the purpose of tonight is for us to hear from you, not really for you to hear from us. As Supervisor Lusk indicated, my title is Independent Police Auditor for the Fairfax County Police Department. And I'll turn back to that thought in just a minute. But just to set the stage, the Board of Supervisors created this position in September of 2016. And hence the title, Independent Police Auditor. I am a county employee. I report directly to Supervisor Lusk and the other 9 members of the Board of Supervisors. I answer directly to them, not at all to the police department. In creating the position, which I began in April of 2017, the Board of Supervisors laid out a very rigid structure for the duties of the independent police auditor. And they are that I monitor and review all investigations of death or serious injury cases that are conducted by the Fairfax County Police Department's Internal Affairs Bureau. I also monitor and/or review any use of force investigation which is the subject of a complaint made by a member of the public to either the Fairfax County PD or directly to me in my office. And I just want to highlight 2 words that I said twice and repeated. I am not authorized by the board to conduct an investigation. I monitor and/or review, depending on the timing, the investigations which are conducted by the Fairfax County Police Department. My review is meant to ensure that their investigations have been conducted accurately, completely, thoroughly, objectively, and impartially. That is my mandate. That's what I'm looking for when I review a police department investigation. I'll make a couple of other comments, and then I'm going to, again, turn it back over to Supervisor Lusk so that we can hear from you. One thing to point out, a death or serious injury case, some people would refer to a death case like this. It must be while an individual is in the custody of the Fairfax County Police Department. An in-custody death, but limited to the custody of the police department. In other words, if the police department makes an arrest and makes the handoff or the transfer of the individual to the Fairfax County Sheriff's Department, and then that individual dies while in the custody of the Sheriff's Department, I have no authority to monitor, review, or comment on that investigation of what occurred. And finally, my other mandates from the board: upon completion of every review that I conduct, I have to issue a public report and an annual report summarizing the reviews that I conducted during the year. And either based on an individual review or a review of departmental policy independent of any one incident, I am mandated to make public recommendations concerning revisions of Fairfax County Police Department policy, training, and procedures. And then finally, my office, again, as a full-time county employee with 2 staff members on board, my office provides all of the necessary administrative support to the Police Civilian Review Panel, from whom we're going to hear next. And with that being said, I will turn it back over to Supervisor Lusk.
Now introduce Holly Doan, who is the chairperson of the Police Civilian Review Panel. She will be accompanied by Jimmy Bierman, who is also a member of the Civilian Review Panel. She will provide us a presentation, and then following that, we can move to any questions that you'd like to ask of our presenters this evening. So thank you and welcome, Holly Doan.
So while we wait for Holly to connect, and it should take just a second, I will just let you all know, if you look at the bottom of your screen right under the picture of Supervisor Lusk and I, there is a button that you can see, and that will take you straight to the website that we referenced earlier. And this is where we've aggregated all the public safety information that Fairfax County has made available up to this point. That's also where we're putting future information. The other thing that's on there is a matrix, which is essentially a public record of all the feedback that we have received up to this point from different advocacy groups and citizens across Fairfax County. So if you would like to make a suggestion to that, just scroll down to the bottom of the website. There's a field that you can fill out, and you can have things added to the matrix as well. And those items will be reviewing and responding to in turn once we can get input from the appropriate departments in the county. So it looks like we have Holly now. So we're going to turn it over to you, Holly, and I'm going to bring your presentation back up on screen.
Okay.
You're fine, go ahead.
Okay,
Yep.
Can you see the presentation? Because I can't see it. Is it up there?
I'm bringing it up now if you just want to go ahead and get started.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go on and just start it. First of all, at the outset, I want to say that thank you, Supervisor Lusk, for holding this listening session. Listening sessions like this are very important to the panel because they give us the opportunity to directly hear from the public as to how civilian oversight is working in our county. We have now been in existence for about 4 years as a panel. Our mission is to build trust between the police department and the community through accountability and transparency. And Jimmy and I will be listening tonight to you to find out how that's going. So I'm going to lay out some fundamental aspects of what we do so that it would be a good foundation for our discussion. We are not an investigative body. We review completed investigations by the police department, and we only review investigations that involve allegations of serious misconduct and abuse of authority. Now, some examples of the kinds of allegations that we review would include racial profiling, racial bias, discrimination of any kind, harassment, false imprisonment, or really any serious violation of police policies and procedures. Our standard of review in the review process itself is whether the investigation was accurate, complete, thorough, objective, and impartial. We have the same standard that the auditor has. And what that means is that when we review an investigation, we determine whether all the witnesses were interviewed, whether all the evidence was considered, and whether the investigation was done objectively and without bias. So investigations that we review begin with a complaint from an individual that either comes to the panel directly or through the police department. And if the complainant is not satisfied with the results of that investigation, he or she can ask the panel to review it. In our review process, all 9 members of the panel must read the investigation file, and that includes all evidence, including in-car video, if there is any, or body-worn camera footage, if there is any. And the complainant has the opportunity to appear before the panel in an open meeting along with the police department representative. And if we determine that the investigation is not complete, etc., we can either ask the police department to conduct further investigation, or we can advise the Board of Supervisors that in our view, the findings are not supported by the information in the investigation file. And if we find the investigation was complete, we concur with the police investigation findings. And then we end our reviews with written reports, which are all available on our website. All our reviews are conducted in open meetings, and audios are posted of all our meetings online. In each review, we can also recommend changes to police practices and policies if we see something in a particular review that would warrant that. We can do this also in our annual report when we look back over the entire year holistically and determine that there needs to be some recommendations made there. And we've made several recommendations over the course of the last 4 years, and all of those recommendations are available on our website in the form of a matrix, which includes the police department and how they've responded to our recommendations. And I'll just conclude by saying that all 9 members serve staggered 3-year terms, and we're appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and we can only serve 2 back-to-back terms. We are all volunteers and are not employees of the county. And finally, the panel reports directly to the board, and we are independent of the police department. With that, I'll turn it back to Supervisor Lusk.
Thank you very much, Holly. I'll make this point, which I didn't make earlier, and it's really an important one. Fairfax is unique in having both this police civilian review panel as well as this police independent auditor. And I think that serves us well in terms of being able to have the community understand what's happening with regard to law enforcement here in Fairfax County. And there's always opportunities for us to do things differently. So I think this process this evening, this listening tour, will give us an opportunity to have you express some of your thoughts. And again, the intent here is to get suggestions and ideas on changes that might be provided in the areas of police reform. So with that, I will turn it back over to Matt. We can start to see what questions we have from the group. So thank you.
May I have a moment first, Matt?
Of course, Jimmy. Yeah, please go ahead.
My name's Jimmy Bierman, and I serve on the Police Civilian Review Panel. I just want to thank Supervisor Lusk for putting together this listening session tonight. It was a terrific idea that he had to invite in the public to comment and to share their thoughts on the Police Civilian Review Panel. I would be remiss, however, if I didn't mention that originally this listening session was supposed to feature all 9 members of the Police Civilian Review Panel. However, on the eve of this listening session, we learned that the county attorney believed that we were not empowered to have public listening sessions under either our action item or under the bylaws of the Police Civilian Review Panel. In fact, the bylaws of the Police Civilian Review Panel and the action item both make clear that we do have the opportunity to hold public meetings. And the bylaws specifically define public meetings as a situation where the public has the opportunity to comment. I think you all should know that, because I really wish that the entire panel were here tonight. I also don't begrudge Supervisor Lusk for listening to what his attorney told him. However, on this one, that is completely contrary to what is in our action item and what is in our bylaws. And we should have been able to have everyone here tonight. I'm not happy about it. And I suggest if you aren't happy about it as well, and if you think that this evening was worth your while, and you want to hear from more members of the Police Civilian Review Panel, I suggest that you give Chairman McKay's office a call or your supervisor's office a call to say that the panel should obviously be enabled to conduct public meetings. And with that, I welcome your questions, and sorry for the legalese. I am a lawyer by trade, and I can't help. Thanks.
And Matt, just so I can...
For a moment, I think we'll give Supervisor Lusk a chance to respond to that, because the sentiment that Jimmy's shared, just in terms of the spirit of transparency and openness and what we're trying to accomplish here, we're 100% on board. So if you'd just like to add to that.
Yeah, I'll just make the point that I understand the frustration. I understand the points that he's just made. What I'd like to do, and I've already indicated this to Holly, is that we will do a follow-up meeting with the county attorney. We'll sit down, we'll talk about this. And my intent is to find a solution for us to be able to provide an opportunity for all the members of the Civilian Review Panel to be a part of any public meeting that's held. Originally, that was the intent for tonight. That's how I had envisioned it. And I was under the impression that we would be able to do that because this was a meeting that I was calling. But I learned that there's some legal issues. And again, I'm not a lawyer, Jimmy. So unfortunately, I can't can't fight the attorney on the legal side, but I do have the opportunity to sit down and talk with her. And I assure you and Holly, I will do everything I can to rectify this for our future meetings. So thank you.
Thank you. And just to be clear, when we have that conversation, I will point to the exact language in our bylaws and our action item, which allow us to have full public meetings. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move to the Q&A period now. Make sure that when you submit a question, please submit it through the Ask a Question section that you can see at the bottom of your screen. If there's a question that you'd like to upvote, please just click the little up arrow to the left. It'll move it up the queue and we'll take them in that order. Although we will be keeping an eye out for duplicates and we'll be taking those out of the queue. And then just very quickly before we get started on the Q&A, there were some resources that Holly spoke about during her presentation. If you're having trouble hunting those down and finding them, we have actually, as part of the new Police Updates website, we have linked the Police Civilian Review Panel to that central page for this very reason. You don't have to go searching for it. Just use the button at the bottom of the screen. It'll take you to the aggregate website, and you'll be able to find everything from there. It's all in one spot for you. So with that, I'm going to move to our first question, and it comes from Diane Alejandro. No surprise there. So good to hear from you, Diane. As always, appreciate all your work and advocacy. Diane's question is for Supervisor Lusk and the CRP members. Would you please answer whether you support legislation to give the CRP investigatory authority, ability to recommend discipline of an officer, give it independent legal counsel, and needed staffing and funding? So I'll probably start with you, Rodney, if that's okay with this one.
Sure.
Something we've been talking about a lot.
Yeah, so I'll say very clearly that I have no personal issue with that, recognizing that there is a need for change in the enabling legislation for that to happen. We know that there will be a special session here in August. We are going to be advocating for a number of those specific changes as well. So stay tuned. We'll have to see what comes out of that session in August, and then we'll be able to bring those items back before the Public Safety Committee for Fairfax County to talk about how we might want to implement them. So I'll say very quickly, yes, we are supportive, but again, we need to have the ability to do that.
Would anyone from the panel like to comment on that?
Sure, I'll do that.
Yeah, and Holly, while you're commenting, sorry, Jimmy, just because your connection's a little faster, I think I'm going to bump you off because the next question is for Richard, and we'll bring you back after Richard answers. So over to you, Holly.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so personally, I do concur with that, and I think each local jurisdiction should be able to have the type of civilian review that best suits their own local jurisdiction. So I would support any legislation that would allow the flexibility for investigation. And I don't speak for the panel on this, but I will tell you that, because we haven't voted on it, but I will tell you that we are now undergoing a 4-year review of all of our efforts for the last 4 years and looking forward, and we will consider this, and that will probably be considered and part of that package that we send the board by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, the next question's a pretty straightforward one, and sorry to put you on the spot, Richard, but what are the qualifications for the independent police auditor?
That's a great question, and Supervisor Lusk alluded to the fact that when the board created this mechanism for civilian oversight here, they went in and created both my position and the panel, which is rather unique in the world of civilian oversight. Many jurisdictions that do have oversight have one or the other, but not both. So with that being said, I was not in the county when the creation of the panel and the auditor was accomplished, but the decision was made that the person who would review use of force incidents would have to have a background or some expertise in use of force issues. Prior to my being appointed the auditor, I was in the FBI's legal instruction unit at the FBI Academy down in Quantico. And for many years, I was studying the law and the practical considerations surrounding use of force, not up to and including, I should say, deadly force. So that was the decision. One other, not qualification, but disqualifier for this position is you cannot have been a member of the Fairfax County Police Department, nor have a relative who's employed by the Fairfax County Police Department. So again, that was part of the rationale exercised by the Board of Supervisors when they created the position.
Okay, thanks for that background, Richard. And I'm going to throw you another one, so please stay with us here.
Sure.
This question is, sorry, another one just came in at the same time. Here we go. To the independent auditor, are you at all concerned by retaliation or workplace harassment by the police department in the event that your reviews to the Board of Supervisors reflect poorly on the police? My concern is, how independent can you really be if you're reviewing the work of the people who have the monopoly in use of force in your neighborhood and workplace?
Yeah, good question, and definitely a legitimate concern. But honestly, do I feel that concern? I have not, and I indicated I worked for several years at the FBI's in the legal instruction unit. I'm independent of the police department. Yeah, I've learned there's an adage in the civilian oversight world that if you're doing your job well, you probably are not making anybody overly happy with what you're doing. And you've got to be objective. Sometimes obviously community members are going to disagree with what I conclude in my reports, and sometimes the police department may not be overly excited about what I indicate in my reports.
Okay. Thanks for that, Richard. We're going to go ahead and bring Jimmy back in now while I read the next question, but I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again. So the next question comes from Nicole Miller, and it is in reference to one of the more recent use of force instances that we've seen in Fairfax County. And her question is, I would like to know, in the most recent incident, one officer was handling the situation with a person of interest. In the middle of that, another officer showed up in the video and escalated the case to a completely different level. His body camera wasn't shown to the public. Why? This would help us understand what made him go to that extreme.
Actually, I think that's more of a question for Richard. It's a use of, it involved
Okay,
a use of force incident.
Kaylee, can we go ahead and bring Richard back? And in the meantime, Rodney, could you just speak to that a little bit, just the incident and the role that you played in the response to that and our position on it and some of the things we've tried to do post viewing that body camera footage? You're on mute, Rodney. Sorry, let me bring you back.
And control it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. This issue is one that was just absolutely difficult for me to watch at the public safety headquarters. And I think the questioner is right in that you could see in that first officer, the skills were really focused on trying to kind of de-escalate the situation, basically stand back from the resident and to really try to coach and support them in making the right decision, which was to get in onto the ambulance. Clearly in the second officer's actions, it was just the opposite. And I felt that was unfortunate. And I'll say that I know that there is some concern amongst those in law enforcement about sort of the issue of due process, but I think ultimately we've got to be clear in what we saw on that camera footage was a complete and specific use of force that was not necessary. I would argue that if the first officer had continued to have the time to work with the resident, we would have had a totally different outcome. So what we've done as a result is the Board of Supervisors at its, not the most recent meeting, but the prior meeting, I and Walter Alcorn, who is the Hunter Mill District Supervisor, made a board motion to request the county executive to have the Deputy County Executive of Public Safety and the Deputy County Executive for Human Services look at a model that takes into account our diversion first example, which is really focused on trying to not have people go into the jails or the system, and to look at a model based in Oregon called the CAHOOTS model to determine at the 911 level, when we're dispatching calls, can we have some of those calls not go directly to the police, especially those that are more human services in nature, that are dealing with behavioral health. So those that have a need for mental health or substance abuse services that are not involving criminality, where there's no indicated risk that the person is a threat to themselves or to others. And in those cases, we could have someone from the Community Services Board who's trained in mental health counseling, substance abuse counseling, go out and work with those cases. So we believe that that's a model that would work extraordinarily well here in Fairfax. And we've asked the county to come back by October 1st with an update on where they are. So we're going to be anxiously awaiting their first kind of update and report, and then determine how we might have a pilot of this program here in Fairfax County in the near term. And the last point I'll make on this is, in Eugene, Oregon, we've seen a reduction in terms of calls by 20%, not having to go to the police department, being handled by this new kind of behavioral health model, and that they've only needed, in about 1% of the cases, to have support and backup by the police, where there was an incident that might have maybe devolved into something else, but 1% of the time it ended up needing additional support. So we would love to see something similar here in Fairfax, and we'll be looking to work on that in the coming months. Thank you.
Matt, I believe the part of the question may have been surrounding the release of the second response.
Exactly. Yes.
On camera, and because I'm in the midst of reviewing the ongoing investigation, I can't say too much about that. But there has been articles in the newspaper referencing that the body-worn camera and the footage captured by the second officer may not have been submitted by him, which will be a separate issue that will be investigated by the police department. So again, I can't go into any specifics, but there may be a very basic reason for that footage not yet being released. And that decision, what was released, that was a decision made by the chief.
Okay, thanks. So more to come on that, and we'll make sure as updates are available, we'll share them through the new website. The next question is for you, Supervisor Lusk. Would you be willing to ask the county attorney to make her opinion public so that we can assess why she is taking this position? Sorry, the questions are coming as faster than I can read them. Other attorneys who represent government agencies do this all the time. Oh,
Wow.
sorry, Rodney, I'm gonna have to ask you to start over.
I get it. It's a little delay. I got to pay attention. I'm looking at the video monitor. Answering the question, yes, I am definitely open to asking the county attorney to provide her opinion. I will have to be clear in saying we'll have to have the meeting first and then obtain her opinion. But yes, happy to do that.
Okay. I'm going to cheat a little bit and move down the queue because I'd like to direct a question to Jimmy, because we've been bumping him in and out. So I'm going to go to Jimmy first on this question. And from the civilian review panel perspective, do you believe that the sheriff's department should be included? Does Virginia law enforcement, does VA law allow for a civil review panel of the sheriff's?
That's an interesting question. To be quite honest with you, I don't know the dictates of Virginia law on this point. I would not be opposed to it being something that the civilian review panel would have oversight over, but it is complicated because the sheriff is a constitutional officer that is elected independent of the Board of Supervisors. The three constitutional officers who are elected in Fairfax County countywide are the chairman of the board, the Commonwealth's attorney, and the sheriff. So I'm not sure exactly whether or not the Board of Supervisors can create a civilian review panel to review the sheriff. Now, it would potentially be possible if there were enabling legislation. And we are going into a special session now with the legislature in which they're going to be looking at all of these issues. So if you believe that that is something that should happen, I recommend calling your legislators, because as of right now, I don't believe that that.
Yeah.
Okay. Rodney, do you have anything to add there? I think that pretty much covers our understanding of it as well up to this point. And
Yeah.
Supervisor Lusk has, we're taking an active role sort of in getting a really solid understanding of the direction that the legislature is moving on this and what things will be before them for consideration. And we are setting meetings with the Fairfax County delegation to Richmond to have these very discussions. So thank you for that question. As I read this question, we might scoot Richard back in for this one. I'm going to predict that this one's for him. In looking at the official annual reports for the police department and the auditor, we can see the racial demographics of the department as a whole, but not by position occupied. Why not? It would let us know to what extent minorities are represented in management and policy settings. Richard, is that best answered by you? Does that kind of fall under your purview?
Well, not to dodge any question, I hate to say it would really be best answered by the chief of police. I will, just by way of background, when the ad hoc commission was convened by Chairman Bulova, one of the 5 subcommittees of the larger ad hoc committee was recruitment and diversity. So that is not an issue that is lost on anybody. I think the diversity of the members of the police department at all levels, from the rank and file line officer all the way to the higher up positions, is something that they are striving for diversity at all positions.
Okay, and I'm going to stick with you here, Richard. You're quite popular at the moment, so we have a couple other questions for you. Would you support giving the independent police auditor, well, I guess maybe we should ask this of the panel, not you specifically, maybe I'm wrong here. Would you support giving the IPA independent investigatory authority? How can the police review themselves as internal affairs does now? So if you're not comfortable answering that, we can go to the panel, I guess. Is that something you'd like to speak to?
I think the panel can address that.
Okay, all right. So we'll start with you, Holly, and if we could bring Jimmy back too, I'd like to get his perspective, please. Sorry, Holly, we just needed a minute to unmute. Go ahead.
So the question is, would the panel support the auditor having investigative authority?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we would. I mean, I would personally. Like I said, I don't speak for the entire panel because the entire panel hasn't considered that issue. So, but I would personally support that. Jimmy?
I don't speak for the entire panel, but I personally would support the panel having some degree of investigatory.
Okay, great. All right, pretty cut and dry then. I'm going to move to the next question. We'll probably circle Richard back in for this one. So independent police auditor, why is it that you have never found a use of force excessive? It is hard to fathom that no excessive use of force has been used. I understand that your functions are limited, but you still find their conclusions acceptable. So I think we're just connecting him now. You should be, yep. Okay, Richard, we're back with you. And let me know if you need me to read any of that again, Richard.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Remember, the mandate is I'm examining or reviewing the investigation to ensure that it was accurate, thorough, complete, impartial, objective. Most of the investigations that I've reviewed have been conducted by the Internal Affairs Bureau, which, from what I've examined, does very thorough reviews of uses of force. I have not found any of the uses of force I've examined to be excessive, but I have agreed and concurred with other separate violations in use of force incidents. And I've made independent recommendations, hopefully to avoid what otherwise have been objectively reasonable uses of force moving forward. So I don't know if that fully answers the question, but that's one explanation for why I think I haven't concluded that any of the reviews I've conducted have resulted in a finding of illegal or policy violation use of force.
Okay. All right, thanks for that. And I have two CRP specific questions coming up. So if we could bring Jimmy back in, and I'll start with the first question, which I think is a fantastic question. So thank you to, you guys are too fast, I believe, yeah, to Kara Ryan for this question. What's the process of becoming an appointee on the review panel? In other words, do folks put their names forward to the Board of Supervisors, or do supervisors nominate folks? Must you be a citizen, and if so, why? What are the demographics of the review board? And then she says, thank you for this session. So a lot of questions, a lot to unpack in there. And Jimmy, would you like to take it first, and then we'll go to Holly, and we'll just alternate for the next one?
Sure. First off, the composition of the Civilian Review Board. We have 9 members. Of those members, one is, I believe, former law enforcement FBI, and another one works for the DC police doing internal affairs investigations himself, I believe. Of the members, there are, I got counted off. There are 2 African American women. There are 4 white men. There is 1 Hispanic man. I'm going to get the numbers wrong. There is a Indian American man, and there is Holly, a white woman. Have I got those all down there?
Yeah, I don't think that they would refer. I think one of them would refer himself as Asian, and the other one as Afro-Latina. But
I
yes.
apologize.
Yeah,
I apologize.
I think the way we would put it is, I think we have 4 members of the panel of the 9 of color, people of color, and they're from diverse backgrounds. We come from also diverse areas of the county, but there are some areas of the county that aren't represented on the panel that I would hope in the future we could find panel members from those areas, such as Mount Vernon and other areas like that.
And I'm sorry if I missed it. I'm doing a few things at once here. Did you all review the process of becoming a panel member? Can you emphasize
I'll
that
take
again?
that. So how that happens is that the Board of Supervisors is in charge of that. We can make suggestions of people that have contacted us or that we know that are interested. We can make suggestions, but that is wholly in the hands of the Board of Supervisors, and they pick the members of the panel.
Okay. All right. Well, if you have interest in that, please reach out to your supervisor. If you don't know who your supervisor is, Kaylee from our team will put our general email address into the chat, and we will help you find out who your supervisor is. So Kaylee, if you could add that, we'd really appreciate it. I'm going to stay with you on this one, Holly, to start us out, and then we might go to Jimmy. What does the CRP recommend to improve their ability to oversee police action? Should you have subpoena power along with more investigative authority? Should complaints be filed with the CRP as well as the police?
Well, again, we're in the middle of our 4-year review, and I anticipate that by the end of the year that we will make recommendations as to that. With regard to our authority right now, that is all dependent upon the special session and what the General Assembly, the enabling legislation provides. So if the special session were to pass legislation giving our Board of Supervisors the authority to give us more authority, then I think that my personal opinion would be that we would look at ways to move in that direction, and begin discussions with members of the Board of Supervisors with regard to that. But first, we have to decide among ourselves what we would recommend, and that is in the process of happening now.
Okay, great. All right, well,
Jimmy, did you have anything to add?
Just to that point, yes. Currently constituted, we do not have investigatory powers. As Holly and I have said, we both think that would ultimately be a net positive for the Police Civilian Review Panel. But we're also cognizant of the fact that not only does there need to be enabling legislation, but that investigatory powers and subpoena power and all of those types of things, do create a need for additional staff, most likely, and we also don't happen to control the purse strings here. But I do think that if there's an enabling legislation, yes, we would support. I would support certain measures that would allow for more investigatory power. Also, as Holly mentioned, we are conducting a 4-year review to look at what has occurred in the first 4 years of the Police Civilian Review Panel. And ultimately, I hope that we can, as a group, vote on certain recommendations as part of that 4-year review.
All right, well, Jimmy, since we're already with you, I'm going to hit you with this question first. This question comes from Lance. Do you think being a former law enforcement officer or lawyer is important to being an effective civilian review panel member? Or can someone without that background be a successful panel member?
So I think that, yes, I think someone without that background could be a successful panel member. We do happen to have, I mentioned law enforcement in part because the action item that created the panel mandates that we have at least one person with a former law enforcement background. And it makes sense that lawyers are often the kinds of people who want to get involved in this type of oversight. That being said, I think that the point of civilian oversight is to bring civilian eyes to various complaints and problems. And I think that you don't have to be a lawyer to understand an investigation that's before you. You can use your own powers of deduction and powers of critical reasoning and thinking. And in part, the point of having a civilian oversight board is to not just have it up to the lawyers or to the police themselves. So I do think that and frankly, we do have members of the panel who are not lawyers, and I think they're great. So, I don't think you need to be a lawyer for a member of law.
Holly, anything for you to add there before the next question?
No, I do think that it has been helpful at times to have different perspectives on the panel. So the requirement that we have someone with police background, not in Fairfax County, by the way, it has to be in another jurisdiction, has been informative, and it's just one other point of view. When we deliberate, we should be open-minded and look at all things to consider while we're applying our own common sense to what we're seeing in the investigative file and the evidence.
Okay. We're going to bring Richard in for this next question, and I will. Okay. Well, Richard, we're bringing you in, so I'll let you speak to that first. And I'm going to read the question while we wait for Richard to connect. Do officers have the opportunity to quit rather than be fired? Oh, Richard, would you like to add your comment before I read the question from the last one?
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing to Holly and Jimmy's response about needing law enforcement experience or legal experience. I think Jimmy and Holly can both back me up on this. For new panel members, they are provided with quite a bit of information on civilian oversight, as well as police department practice and procedures. And about twice a year, the panel is provided with very good training, some of which is provided by the police department, so that they know what to look for when they're reviewing an investigation. And we've also had a national group known as NACOL, the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, actually traveled to Fairfax County and provided very quality training specific to our civilian review panel. And I attended all of the training. It was very good.
Yeah, I would just clarify that the training, the police do not tell us how to conduct the investigation, but it is helpful to hear from them in terms of how what their general orders are, and how their procedures and regulations affect their policing and their investigative work. That's really important to know. We also do ride-alongs, which helps inform us about what's on the street and we just ride along and observe. And that's been very helpful to understand how what goes down in a basically a patrol.
Supervisor Lusk, will come to you because I know this is one of the things that we saw in the matrix that you've already spoke about sort of proactively while we go through this process just to get an answer out there. So Richard, for you, do officers have the opportunity to quit rather than be fired like in the federal government? Are there ways to prohibit those people from taking jobs in other divisions, other states, or in federal law enforcement? So essentially just moving to another jurisdiction if they were to be fired by Fairfax County Police Department.
If that does in fact take place, and let's back up, you can't prevent an officer or anybody else from quitting, but a notation should certainly be made that an officer resigned while under investigation. And if a prospective employing agency will take the time and get a release signed by that former officer, then they would certainly be entitled to the information that the individual resigned pending investigation.
Supervisor Lusk?
Yeah, here I think one of the recommendations that will probably be before the General Assembly is creating a statewide database that would include information on cases very similar to this. And I think that would be important not just for the departments to know as they're recruiting and thinking about hiring, but also for the public to be aware if an officer has committed some offense in another jurisdiction or is under investigation. I think that should be considered when making a decision about employment. So having a statewide database that's publicly available would certainly be a way to address that. So stay tuned. I believe that will be also one of the items that we will see before the General Assembly here in August.
This next question is for the CRP. I'm going to read it as written. To the CRP, I know your authority is too limited, but even with those restrictions, how can you have always found the investigations of racial profiling, etc., are accurate, complete, objective, and thorough?
I'd be happy to take this one. So with respect to that question, we currently have an open investigation where we have not signed off on. Our job is to look at the evidence before us, and we have had several. I've been on the panel for about 17 months, I think. Maybe it's less than that. We have had situations where where there has been a claim of racial profiling in which the evidence has not held up, and we also have a situation right now where we have a case before us, and we have not cleared that investigation as complete, thorough, and accurate. That is our limited mandate, and often what we do is we send back multiple. We have sent back multiple investigations to say that we thought that there was additional information needed. In particular, in one of those investigations, the additional information yielded a footage from inside a police car that showed that an individual who had been alleged to have smelled a lot like marijuana had a large bag of marijuana with him. The answer is that we are not clearing everything. The police certainly wouldn't say we're clearing everything. And we're doing our best here to make sure that are complete, thorough, and accurate investigations.
I would add that sometimes the effect of what we do isn't necessarily visible in the final outcome. A lot is done in the process. So in the process of reviewing the investigation, we've been pushing. I've been on the panel since the beginning, and I can tell you that because of our reviews and because of our analysis of the investigative file, the quality of the investigative file in IAB has improved immensely. And that is because we've been pushing for it to be more thorough, more complete, etc. With regard to racial profiling, I will just say this, that we have in the past felt that this has been raised, that these types of investigations need a different process from the most routine investigations. In other words, there are things that are raised in racial profiling and racial bias that are unique to those types of cases. And therefore, we've been asking the police department to look at those with a special lens and to come up with a process whereby they can screen implicit and explicit bias better. And we've sent back 2 investigations on racial bias and racial profiling to do just that. And right, as Jimmy said, we're in the middle of another one right now. So stay tuned.
Okay, I'm just going to transition us to the next question. This is for the CRP again, so we'll stick with the 2 of you. CRP, if you're having at least one person with a law enforcement background in the CRP, would it make sense to also have one person with negative run-ins with law enforcement? Having members that have only had positive run-ins with police or that have done the enforcement themselves may not necessarily reflect the reality on the ground. I think we went to Jimmy first last time, so I think Holly might.
Okay, I don't know if I understand the question.
So I think the core of what the individual's question is, can you speak to, I guess, maybe I don't know if this is something that you all share or get into, but the life experiences of those of you who make up the panel. So Jimmy mentioned that there's someone with a law enforcement background. Is there somebody, due to some circumstance in their life that they've articulated before, who has the experience of having a negative encounter with law enforcement that may give them a perspective that you all might not have, or the law enforcement professional might not have? Do you know if that's the case with the current panel?
So I can speak to some unique situations of panel members that make them specially attuned to special circumstances. Is that what you're getting at? Something like that?
I think that's at the core of the question.
So, well, I'll just point out my own experience and why I wanted to be a member of the panel. That's a pretty good one. I have a son who has Down syndrome. And when this panel was being formed, I was aware of some instances throughout the country, one in Baltimore and one here in Annandale, in which people with disabilities lost their lives because of police encounters. And that moved me to want to become involved in this panel. There are other people on the panel that have had mental health, people with mental health issues in their family. That was the reason that they wanted to be part of this panel. I think everyone has a story as to why they wanted to be on the panel, and it's usually because that they've experienced some issue in their lives that is meaningful to them in terms of police encounters and interaction.
Yeah, we haven't exactly polled every member of the panel on, have you had negative encounters? But let me just say that we certainly do have members of the panel who have had encounters at some point in time. The members of the panel, and to your question, to be very direct about it, yeah, sure, it does make sense to have somebody who has had negative encounters on the panel. It's part of life. There's no litmus test here that says you can't be on the panel if you've had a negative encounter or you that's just not the case. I mean, in my personal experience, I've worked on criminal justice reform. When I was in law school, I represented a man who struck out under California's 3 strikes law for aiding and abetting the sale of 0.07 grams of crack cocaine. It was his 3rd strike, and therefore he was given a 25-year to life sentence. So I've often, for years, I've worked on criminal justice reform related things, and I think the component of criminal justice happens to be the interactions between individuals and the police. So I think that that's just part of my perspective and why I was excited to have the opportunity to join the panel. But yes, I think you can.
I can remember one panel member now. He's not on the panel, unfortunately. He is deceased now, but his name was Randy Sales, and he was African American, and he had former police experience, and he had a very bad encounter with the Fairfax County Police. And as I recall, Richard, please chime in here if I get this wrong, but my recollection is that he was picking up trash along the highway, and he was stopped by the police and had a bad encounter. And that ultimately resulted in him wanting to be on the panel because of that encounter. So I think that we have had people in the past being on the panel because of a bad experience. Is that your recollection, Richard?
Yeah, that's exactly my recollection. Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Richard next, and then into Supervisor Lusk for another question after this one. So I think you're gonna have to speak to this one in kind of the totality of your work, but I'm gonna read it as it's written in reference to the specific situation, Richard. I am a domestic violence / rape survivor in Fairfax County. How can you ensure that Fairfax County Police will not re-victimize an individual for reporting a domestic violence or sexual violence crime and hold perpetrators accountable? And I think some of this also might be tied to, I don't know where we are in the investigation. I'm sorry, I haven't been following it incredibly closely at this point of where it is, but I think there is a specific instance of an FCDP officer that this might be in relation to.
I don't know if I can respond adequately to that question. I will say this: the police department does have victim and witness assistance professionals who should be a part of a domestic violence or a rape investigation. I've heard for many years, the investigators of the crimes, they have certain objectives, and sometimes their objectives do not mesh very well with the victims of those type of crimes. I acknowledge that. I can't ensure that victims of those heinous crimes may not feel re-victimized, but that shouldn't happen. And if it does, you can certainly make a complaint to the police department or to the panel and say that the investigation is not being handled in a professional manner.
Yeah, I think the important piece is that we have your office and the panel as a recourse situation. Mm-hmm. The next question is for Supervisor Lusk. If the General Assembly were to allow civilian review panels investigatory and subpoena powers, would you push for the extra funding that would be needed?
Okay, I'll hope that in the discussion at the General Assembly, they will also talk about funding, and that would be a component of what they might provide. So I guess in terms of opportunity, I hope that the General Assembly might help the localities with that. If it comes down to it's an unfunded program, then we're going to have to have a discussion about how we would fund it. I'll be perfectly honest in saying that in this COVID era, there's so many things that need attention, and there's how do I say this delicately? There's some challenges in state, local, and federal governments as it relates to funding. But we would certainly have to look at this as a board, and I would say any items that are approved at the General Assembly that we want to take action on would be brought first to the Public Safety Committee, and then a recommendation would go from the Public Safety Committee up to the Board of Supervisors. So I guess the short answer is we would certainly want to, advance those items that we can from the General Assembly, and if we need to find funding, we'll have to figure out how to do that as well.
So this next question was directed specifically at Richard, but I think I'd like to ask it of the panel too, because I think it would be interesting to the folks who have joined us tonight. So Richard, first, do you have staff? How many? And what are the general qualifications of working for the auditor? And then same question to the panel, what kind of staff support do you have? So over to you, Richard.
I have 2 full-time staff employees, one of whom devotes a vast majority of her time to handling the administrative obligations of the panel. And Holly can certainly speak to her qualifications and the work that she performs. The second full-time employee is an individual with criminal justice background, a master's degree. She did a lot of work involving in prisons and specifically female inmates of prisons. She has a very vast research and data background, which is immensely helpful in my office for some of the one particular project that my office conducts on an annual basis, and a larger project that we've contracted out with an independent research entity, and she's very, very involved in that. Holly, I'll let you kind of respond to, I guess, the lack of full-time staff employed by the panel, but the work that my staff provides.
We have the use of one of, as Richard said, one of the administrative staff people. She's wonderful. She's absolutely wonderful. She keeps us all all in line. So I just have wonderful things to say about her. Having said that, there's a ton of work associated with the panel on a daily basis. And the chair, whoever is the chair, and we serve 1-year terms, it's almost a full-time job. And bear in mind, it's volunteer. So, I mean, lately, the last couple of months, I've been spending 8 hours a day on this.
Yeah.
So that can't continue. And so we have spoken to Supervisor Lusk and the chairman about the need for us to do something different about that.
Okay, the next question is for Supervisor Lusk, and we might want to get the panel input on this as well. Supervisor Lusk, is oversight at the police department limited to reactive review of incidents? Is there oversight of general management, leadership, and morale of the force? And maybe you might want to expand to this a little bit, because you've only been in this role for 7 short months. Some of the things that you've been proactively doing to, maybe it's not oversight, maybe it is a form of oversight to get integrated and become familiar with FCPD and public safety writ large in the county.
Exactly. So I'll start by saying, yes, the board has oversight over the police department. It's one of the departments under the purview of the board, and one that we fund. We have, over the last 7 months, and I'll say more particularly in the last 2.5 to 3 months, been more active on public safety issues. I'll say that we recognize that the police are going to be active participants in helping us solve some of the issues that we have as it relates to police reform, and we have to engage them. We have to understand what issues they have. We have to understand what thoughts and recommendations they have as well. We've had a series of meetings, starting with the police unions, talking about their issues. We've now started a number of individual police station meetings. We are going to be meeting with the SRO teams, school resource officer teams at, looks like it'll be 4 magisterial district stations. We'll also be talking to frontline workers in the police department, and we'll also be talking at roll calls. So we are trying to make ourselves available and understanding some of the concerns and issues that the department has. And I think, morale is definitely of concern to the board. We care about the folks who put their lives in the line on behalf of this community. But I will say that this is a time where there's going to be change. Anyone who believes that there will be no change as a result of all the things that have happened in the last few months and years has not been paying attention. And for those who might have issue with transition and issue with change, I would anticipate that there will be some members of law enforcement who might decide that they no longer want to be a part of the Fairfax County Police Department. And I'm not here to say, you shouldn't or you should, but that's a decision that they're going to have to individually make. But I recognize that, in transition, people make decisions. And we will be working with, the chief of police. We'll be working with the deputy county executive for public safety to address a number of these concerns and issues.
From the board, is there anything that you all would like to add? I guess I know you can't speak for the board, but maybe from a personal perspective and just where you all see this process going. Is there anything that you'd like to add to what Rodney said?
I just have one thing, and it goes back to something that Holly said earlier. We have seen certain changes or recommendations be implemented by the police department off of what the police civilian review panel has recommended. So, that does get to the question of essentially, reviewing pre-review, but it does get into the question of how the police department is managed and how and training and other issues like that. And in a number of respects, we found that the police department has been quite responsive to these recommendations. They don't always agree with us, but they do sometimes, and more than sometimes, frankly. And I think that has played a role. That has been the benefit of having the panel in place. It has been the back and forth and the give and take that we've had with the department to try and implement positive change.
Yeah, I would just recommend that, as I said in my opening statement, that we have this matrix of recommendations that we have posted on our website, and you can go through those and see, the kinds of recommendations that we've made and how the police have responded. And I think most of the time they've responded positively. There's only a couple of instances where they have not. So I think the panel has had an impact within our narrow authority. We've had an impact in terms of moving the needle, in the direction that we have recommended.
I'm going to go to Supervisor Lusk again for the next question, and I'm going to add a caveat after I read the question. So, is Fairfax County able to implement the legislature's new Community Policing Act's data collection requirements on police interactions that took effect on July 1? So we don't have that legislation in front of us, so I don't know if Supervisor Lusk is going to be able to speak to that specifically, but I would like to get him to speak to it based off of one thing that we've noticed as we've done a lot of these meetings is in many instances, the data that folks are requesting access to that they think FCPD or the county isn't providing, they actually are. It's just very difficult to find. So that's one thing we've tried to fix with the website that you guys can see now at the bottom of your screen. And then Supervisor Lusk, if maybe you could speak to this process that we're going through now internally at the county to make data collection more comprehensive and more transparent, and what the timeline you think for that might be.
Yeah, there's a number of points here. The first, I want to commend the chief of police. Chief Rossler has heard loud and clear from the board that, we've got to provide more statistical information about, arrests and stops, as well as other citations that are being made with our community by race, ethnicity, and other demographics. So the thing that we're seeing is that the department is moving towards that, and they've already made available a number of reports. And as Matt indicated on this little button here on the screen, the green button, if you go to the website, you'll see what reports have been recently made available, including, I mentioned earlier, the SRO and the use of force data for 2019. We can do better. And right now, the department is in the process of hiring a new vendor to help them with their technology needs, and then also helping them develop platforms so that they can aggregate and then present data to the community. So we are building in discussions with them as we speak about how they're going to go about doing that. It looks like the vendor selection will probably take a few months, but we have already begun talking with the University of Texas. The University of Texas has been hired by the police independent auditor to help with use of force data from 2016, 2017, 2018, and they'll be giving us some feedback on each of those years as it relates to their analysis of the data, and they're going to be using multivariate modeling and other processes for it. What is also going to be helpful as a part of their contract, they're going to help the department in kind of thinking through what types of data they should be collecting, how they should be collecting it, how can we work more closely with the state of Virginia through its police efforts to share and collaborate on that data collection, and then how do we present that data so that people can kind of see and understand what's happening. So there's a lot kind of going on right now around data, and I'm feeling a lot more confident that we're going to be able to get more information out to the community, and we'll have more transparency, which I think most people are asking for. And the last point I'll make here, Matt, is it's been consistent from almost each of the advocacy groups who made the point to us that data is one of the most important elements that they need to see more of, and that the police department should be providing through some systematic timeline information about arrests, stops, use of force, and a number of other variables. So we will continue to push for this, and as I said, we're making some progress.
Yeah, and one of the other key elements that I know that the county's looking for in this vendor, and we'll see what the outcome is, but is the ability to take snapshots in time of that data as needed in designated windows. So these aren't yearly reports or biannual. Sure. We can look at any period of time at any time and pull that out. And I think that's a really important part of transparency. So that's something we're really looking for. So look, we're getting tight on time. So I'm going to ask a final question of the panel. Then I'll ask if we bring Richard back, we'll give him a chance for some closing remarks, and then we'll cycle through the panel ending with Supervisor Lusk just for some quick outro remarks to wrap it up. But this final question, which I think is a poignant one to end on, to the CRP, in addition to investigatory powers and independent legal counsel, what other tools would you want from the General Assembly? And I'll let you all decide who'd like to take that first.
Jimmy, you want to go with that?
Sure. It piggybacks right on what we were just, what Supervisor Lusk was just talking about. And it has to do with the question of enhanced data, more information about what is actually happening with respect to police stations and to police statistics. Additionally, there are certain things that end up in for instance, in Hollywood, get this exactly right because we've talked about it. an oral reprimand does not necessarily go in the police file. And so a situation like that, it won't go in a person's long-term file. And then the other thing to all of this, these data questions, are that there are certain restrictions on personnel record that make it harder for on the use of personnel records. They're not FOIAble. That make it harder for us in the public to always know exactly what's going on. I don't. That's not me blaming the police. It's just that's just how it is right now. There are certain restrictions. Ollie, yeah.
Yeah, I think that the General Assembly is, at least the delegates that I've spoken with are aware of this, but there needs to be some real changes to FOIA, in the sense that if we really are serious about having transparency and accountability, then some thought needs to be given on how you handle discipline of officers. And all of that is tied up in our FOIA legislation. And as Jimmy said, like, for example, when we go to investigate a file, we as members of the panel can find the discipline rendered in a particular complaint, but we can't talk about it publicly. So there's a good argument that I think that at least if you didn't want to basically publish the officer's name, that you could publish the discipline, like the Bar Association does. I'm a member of the bar, and every month, I get a list of all the discipline that's happened. So, and that helps the members of the bar understand that, what is being disciplined and what is not. And so I think that the members of the public deserve no less with regard to their police department. In the very least, they should know that the kinds of infractions that are happening in a police department and the kinds of disciplines that are being rendered out. That's going to take state legislation.
Great. Well, I'm going to move us to closing remarks here, but before we do that, I just want to say first a huge thank you to everyone who joined us tonight for this really important discussion. And then an equally large thank you to our amazing communications manager, Kaylee Ashom, who's been behind the scenes tonight, helping facilitate all of this and did a ton of the front end work with the panel to make this possible. So everyone, Kaylee, we appreciate you, and I know that sentiment's shared by everyone on the call. So Richard, over to you first, just for some brief closing remarks, and then we'll wind down over to everybody else.
Oh, thank you, Matt. And my closing remarks may not be the typical closing remarks. I'll just echo what Matt just said. Thank you all for joining tonight and again, taking time out of your busy schedule to share your thoughts and ideas. And my final nod will go to Chairman Lusk and the board members. He gave my office a little too much credit when he said that we contracted with the University of Texas. That was a mandate given to me by the board last May, and of course the board provided the funds for the data study, which I'm very optimistic. And I'll finish with this. There's a huge concern in the community because I've heard the concern many times in the past several years. For as many years as the use of force data has been released by the police department, approximately 40 to 45, even closer to 50% one year, use of force incidents involved an African-American individual, while African-Americans only comprise roughly 9 to 10% of the population in the county. Mm-hmm. So is there a disparity in the numbers? Clearly. What I'm optimistic about from the study, hopefully, will be a determination of possible causes for the disparity. Those are the multivariate benchmarks that the researchers are examining to try to reach some conclusions on causes. And as Supervisor Lusk indicated, moving forward, we expect research team to make strong recommendations about the collection of and reporting out of data forward. So I'll finish with that. Thanks to the community and thanks to the Board of Supervisors.
Thanks for that, Richard. So we'll go to Holly now, and then Jimmy. Oh, I think Holly might have accidentally left us. Just one second. We'll bring her right back.
Oops.
There we go. Holly's coming back. Over to you, Holly. Yep. And then we'll I didn't know you were that angry with us, Holly. Geez.
No, I just got dropped. I want to thank the Board of Supervisors, this one and also the past one, for being very supportive of the panel, and in very difficult times sometimes. You've had our back, and there has been a commitment to see this through, both in starting the panel, which was a very courageous thing to do, and there was a lot of opposition to doing that, and the panel was created, and the auditor, and we had some growing pains. And I just want to thank you we couldn't have done it without the political support of the Board of Supervisors. So thank you. The other thing I wanted to say is that I think all of us on the panel are mindful of the time in history that we're in. And we're in a moment of time where these issues with regard to policing in communities have the attention of the nation and in our community. And we would be remiss if we didn't take this time to really stand back and look in a really holistic way from top to bottom what we're doing right and what we may be doing, or what we could be doing a little bit better. And that is in all of the areas of use of force, in the areas of policing on racial bias, and looking at explicit and implicit bias. So I would just say that we are mindful that this is a point in time, and I think we'll meet the challenge.
Thanks for that, Holly. Jimmy, over to you.
I just want to thank Supervisor Lusk for this great idea of having a listening session. And I really want to thank him for putting this together. It was driven largely by him. He wanted the public to know more about our committee, about the panel, and to have input on what the panel looks like. And I think that's incredibly important. And I'm very happy that this was put together. And I want to thank all of you for showing up tonight. It's great to hear your thoughts on how the panel is going and what it should look like. And I think that's an incredibly important point, because this panel was established with the specific purpose of increasing trust in the community, with the police and between the police and community. So I guess the last point I leave you. Look, our panel meetings are not always full of fireworks. They are not always the most exciting meetings. And I know I'm really selling it here, but that being said, they are public. And right now, due to awful circumstances, we're all at home and they're being done virtually. So you can sign in and you can listen to them. And I really urge you to do so. Hold us accountable, hold the board accountable, hold the police accountable. But also, it's a great opportunity for you to learn. The police get to make their case at many of our meetings. Much of the time, the complainant comes to the meeting as well. You get to hear about what the panel's actually doing. So I just urge you to come by a meeting sometime. And thank you all very much for being here tonight. And thank you, Supervisor.
Before I move over to Rodney, I'll just give one quick plug. I see in the chat a note from Delegate Vivian Watts. She said, very valuable additional insight for potential legislation we are discussing. So it's great for Delegate Watts to attend, and everyone should be proud of the fact that this insight hasn't gone unnoticed tonight. So the things that you've shared, the questions that you've raised are certainly getting carried down the pipeline. So thank you for joining, Delegate Watts, and over to you for the closing words, Supervisor Lusk.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge your efforts here tonight as well. So your facilitation, as usual, exceptional. So I'll say thank you to Holly, thank you to Richard, and thank you to Jimmy for your participation here this evening as well. This is our first in the series. We want to have more of these listening sessions. So I'll say to Jimmy, I heard you loud and clear. I will be talking to the county attorney first thing tomorrow, and we'll see what we can do to try to rectify this in the future. I think the point is we need to be able to engage the entire panel in this discussion so that they can have the opportunity to hear, and they will be able to hear, by the way. We will make available this audio and video recording so that those who were not able to participate this evening can go back and hear it. But we do want to find a way for them to be actively able to participate in the future. I'll say that we'll continue to seek input and feedback. So if you have thoughts, additional ones, even from the ones that were shared here tonight, please check out our public safety website, and please add any suggestions. We're gonna look at every single suggestion, and we're gonna eventually have an opportunity to provide some response on what action we'll be able to take in terms of the status. I personally, now I'll make this point, and I guess many of you might not be aware of this. I spent 30 years in the county before I became a member of the Board of Supervisors. I worked in human services. I worked for 2 members of the Board of Supervisors, and I worked in economic development. My longest stint was in economic development for 21 years. So when Jeff McKay asked if I would chair the Public Safety Committee, I was really excited because I realized this would be an opportunity for me to work in the one area where I had done kind of the least during my 30-year term in the county. Little did I know how active this committee would be, and I am really, really excited about this opportunity. And like Holly, we're going to rise to this challenge, and I look forward to working with all of you. And again, thank you for participating this evening. This was extraordinarily helpful, and thank you for the work that you guys are doing at the Civilian Review Panel each and every day. So with that, I'll conclude.
Thanks again, everybody. Stay safe, stay
Thank you.
healthy, and we'll see you for the next one.